my advice is that your perfection, you're already perfect, and so that's not going to take away from the ability to deliver the material if you have to take a peek at it. But I also feel like you got to take the best and leave the rest, and that's really, really important. I feel like we always want to walk in and be perfect, but what people are looking to see is if you have the complete feeling of the character, if you know who this person is, not so much that you remember exactly what they wrote.
Congratulations on this this amazing achievement that is this show. What was it like watching it just now?
I get emotional because the show was a very, very challenging show to make, but it was also, this particular episode is the 6th episode, and so a lot of the story that had taken place before this, that maybe some of you have seen or maybe some of you haven't, sort of affects this one. And because it has such a deep impression on me in shooting it while I lived it, and executive produced it, I get a little bit like, oh wow, we did it. I feel like this episode is really powerful. It really moves, but it also brings all of the other episodes into the light in this one.
Absolutely, and I feel like a good way to start is to ask you just about how this series has differed from everything else you've done, because I think there's a lot of really big differences. Executive producing for one thing, but also is this, correct me if I'm wrong, this is one of your first times being top of the call sheet, #1 on the thing, playing a protagonist at the very center of the story, and in my mind, not as villainous a character as you've played in the past.
Yeah, he's different. He has a heart and a soul, and he has a conscience, and I think that you see it exemplified in the episode. It was certainly wonderful to be #1 on the call sheet and to be in one way in control of my own destiny and telling this story. But that was the trajectory from the beginning. I think all in all, this took 8 years to bring to fruition, and it changed along the way based on The Driver, a British television show that were 3 2-hour movies. And when I saw The Driver, I recognized something in David Morrissey's performance. I recognized myself in the character, and I realized that a part of my life, I had lived that part of my life, and I yearned to be able to sprinkle more of that into this character in this new incarnation placed in New Orleans. So although it was a great responsibility to be in the position I was, it was also a responsibility to tell a good story. And it's a crime drama that moves, that has a certain particular amount of violence in it, but it's also a story about someone who's trying to bury their past. It's also a story about the loss of a child, and it really has a lot of elements in it that I think I have children myself, and we want to keep our children safe, and I beat myself up. As I said to one of my children just 24 hours ago, I'm angry at myself because I feel like this part of you that I'm disappointed in, I didn't raise you right. So when you feel my frustration towards you, it's not toward you, it's toward me, because I felt like I didn't give you the right tools to deal with this kind of situation. So I think that Gracie and Parish is dealing with some of that here as well. It's also a story about addiction. And in many ways, this particular scene in here that's so very powerful about trying to escape our addictions, and it's a story about trading one addiction for another, and it's a story about being organically truthful and honest about who you've been, and does that mean I have to admit that I'm still that, or is that me before, but that was still a part of me, and how do you admit all that and have people look at you and see you the same way? But this story for me has been a journey of having no fear, and really looking at myself for who I really am and who I have been and who I want to be, and expressing that so that I don't have to feel like I'm running away from anything anymore. And so that's very personal, but it is the truth of what has come through me in telling this story, and realizing that to fear who you've been is to not want to acknowledge and take responsibility for all of that human being that you were. And to think that that human being can come back is also wrong if you're not living the kind of life that you should live. So all of that's a lot to digest, but it still comes through in this project that I'm so very proud of.
I feel like a big, great TV, specifically for TV, question is, can people change? And it feels like this is that kind of series that is asking that fundamental question. And you as an actor get to play with that of like, yes, he can. Oh, wait, maybe not. There's a back and forth there of like.
I think that's part of the excitement of this show, because I think people can change, but I think it takes time, and I think it takes work. And I think it takes a clear view of seeing who you really are, because we want to say that we can change, and then all the stuff is washed away. I have a daughter here with me tonight, and I'm really grateful that she's here. And a year ago, we were in London, and we went to have a meal. And she looked across the table at me, and she said, Papa, I never thought that people could change. But then I look at you, and I realize that they can. And so that's when I realized that I wanted to embody being that change and not just saying I want to. And so that effort in my personal life, and again, very personal, but that effort is eternal in me now, because I feel like I want to represent who I am in a more truthful, honest way. And Seer, thank you for saying that to me, because that moment also helped me to keep on the track that I'm on.
That's so beautiful, and thank you for sharing. Yeah, that truthfulness comes through in this performance, and I think in all your performances. And what I love, this is the SAG-AFTRA Foundation Conversation. This is a room full of actors. I think that using a project like this to discuss your process gets at something truthful. And sometimes by asking about very specific things in a project, we learn so much about you and about your process, and actors can get a lot out of that. Can I ask real quick about, specific about this project is the driving. What does that entail? You look very cool doing this driving. And I'm also like, maybe for those who don't know, and I don't really know, what does a stunt driver do? How much of it was stunt driving work? What did you learn?
There was some stunt driving work. I would love to take all of the credit, but I certainly will take most of it, because I did most all the driving in the show. I'm a driver. I love to drive. I always have. And when I went down for this, of course, the stunt people wanted to meet with me and took me to a parking lot and had me run through cones and show me things that I didn't know, and which was really great to do. In our first episode, I do a reverse 360 in a Porsche Macan, and right in traffic. And I made it, and I did it, and I didn't wreck the car. So, and it looks amazing. It's exciting to do the driving. There are moments where you have to reel yourself back. My youngest daughter, Ruby, worked in the camera department. We were doing a scene in the narrow streets of New Orleans. And maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but so there was a parade. I had to dodge the parade and zip up a street. And she was on the camera truck a block away, and that Porsche Macan makes this really deep throttled, low throaty noise. And she heard it a block away. She ran to the set. She knew I was driving down the street. The focus puller saw her come up and went, I couldn't even get a focus on the car. He was going that fast. The first AD came to me and said, Giancarlo, you cannot drive that fast. And that's when he first told me, I didn't know this, we don't own the street. Like, what if a dog stepped out? What if one of the extras tripped over the curb? I went, yep, I got it. So, you have to be careful, of course, and most of the time I was. But I do enjoy driving, and I think part of the juxtaposition of the show is that it is a character-driven drama. But the other part is, and then one of the reasons why I love this episode is because it moves. It should be exciting, so that you have a little bit of everything, and that is what makes a show great. I think if you can really, we can really get underneath the experience of the Tongais, these human traffickers trafficking their own people. You can get through to the power and political dynamics. But what I think is wonderful for me is the family dynamics. Like, we all have a family dynamic that I realize sometimes has caused, well, for me, I'll just speak for myself, has caused trauma in my life that's unacknowledged. And so part of the creative process of this and the journey that I've taken with it is to realize I don't have to be afraid to share some of that trauma, and some of it's awful, but at least we're here as, we're a lot of actors, and it's SAG-AFTRA I really love. I have such great stories about SAG-AFTRA when I first got my SAG card, and how much I've been helped by the organizations that surround SAG-AFTRA. My mother was in the Actors Home, was accepted because of my time in. It goes on and on and on. I was broke when I was young, and you could go to SAG-AFTRA and they would pay your rent for a month and your electric bill and all this. These are kind of great things that SAG-AFTRA does, but that's another family. And that was a family that accepted me as a young actor and embraced me and took care of me, even when I wasn't who I am now. And so that's really important for me to mention, because SAG-AFTRA saved my life. I remember Iggy Woofington back then, who was on the board, who I had to call to say, look, I'm broke, I'm down and out, will you, pay my rent? But back to family, I think the secret journey of family, and Gracie and Parish does have secrets, and those secrets that we hide and the masks we wear surrounding those secrets are what keep us in jail. That's what keeps us locked up. So in this last moment of the show, when he comes back to the hotel room, he's looking for his family. He did all of this for his family. What he didn't do was tell the truth along the way. What they had to find out was that he had another life, that he did something else. And so in that grief-filled moment in the end, where will Gracie and Parish go? Will he try to really take responsibility and find his family and right that wrong? Will he go back into the world, the dark side of the world, now that he's solved the mystery of his son? All these things wear on us, but our journey is day to day, right? I know mine is day to day. I know I make a choice somehow, even when I'm not feeling like, up to par and completely 100%, to be present and to try to say, I can talk right now, I'm good, or I can't talk right now, I just need to sit with you. I can't express what I'm going through. That kind of honesty is what this show has cultivated within me.
Beautiful, and I'm so glad that you mentioned secrets and masks, because I definitely want to ask specifically you. I think this is true of a lot of great actors, of which you are one, of which this performance is emblematic of this, of text versus subtext, and what's on the page versus what's going through a character's head. Could you talk about where in your process is it an inner monologue? It's been said that sometimes dramatic tension is in if your character is saying and doing one thing, but meaning or thinking the opposite, that's where real drama is. Does that resonate?
It resonates a great deal. I feel like you can just say the lines, and sometimes the lines give you everything you need. As in some shows I've done, we've had great writing, and what can I control? How can I control the inner dialogue or what happens for me? It's the space and time in between the lines. And it's giving myself time. And we're in a business in television and in film as well that wants you to say it fast, faster, quicker, better, all those things, and doesn't allow sometimes an actor to have his own or her own rhythm. And so for me, I find that's what's strong is to always have a thought in my head surrounding what's informed by the words. And if I have that thought, and if I know my lines, I insist on knowing my lines in a bulletproof fashion. Because if I'm searching for my lines, I'm not able to give you the emotional content of what I'm feeling about what I'm saying in between those lines. So for me, it really has been a journey to do less and to have a very specific thought and not to engineer that thought. Allow it to come out of and be informed by what we're talking about, and then let that grow and keep that emotion simple, but allow something to be happening other than, just focusing on even the intention of the line. If you know the line well enough and you hear your voice inside you, you can display something else that's in complete juxtaposition to what you're saying. So, and to me, that is what acting is. It's sort of a fascinating journey in that way.
I also feel like your stillness and your silence, I mean, you also come from this musical background, and I'm fascinated always by rhythm and tone in your voice and the way that you use that. But can we generalize and say that to play these villainous characters that you mentioned, this character has a conscience, but other ones maybe haven't? Are you weaponizing silence and stillness and like those spaces in between to create those, like all the drama around those thoughts that you're talking about, as opposed to the line?
Absolutely. I feel like Gracie and Parish has a soul, and he's not that cold guy. There's a part of me that is that cold guy. And I can turn that on and turn it off as an actor, but I can also be that way, that disdaining human being in life by not allowing sharing my natural compassion and love. So I'm a withholder. All right. And if I'm against you, I'm withholding something and you feel it. And that's coldness. And I can be that and have been that. And so for me, yes, I'm weaponizing all of that to be able for you to see against what he's saying, because our lives our energy is 90% water, and we're energetic beings. So all of it's music to me. Like I look at this as a score. It's all music, it's all energy, it's all moving, it's all waves, and which is why I go up and down with my intonation, and I go up and down with the tonal effect of my voice, whether it's in a deep place or a higher place. That displays how you're feeling. If you say something weakly or strongly, it makes a huge difference on how we perceive it and how we hear it. And then I play with intention. I play with intention behind a lot of what I'm saying. It doesn't even matter what I'm saying anymore. If my intention is juxtaposed to what I'm saying, I stick with that intention so that you can tell and you can know somewhere deep inside me that I'm not telling the truth, or that I'm saying something other than what I'm saying.
I feel like an emerging theme in this conversation is about like putting up walls versus vulnerability. And as an in each of your characters, you're creating degrees of that and deciding when to do that. But does it also apply to the life of an actor, especially in your early career days of like you have to have a tough, thick skin to handle a bunch of rejection, and you also have to be emotionally accessible and open and free? And
it's a roller coaster ride as an actor, because when you feel rejection, even as a human being, when you feel rejected, you can hear it coming from someone, even if their eyes are displaying love, but their voice is rejecting you. You can feel that. And so I've experienced a great deal of rejection. And when I find out the reasons I was rejected, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a job because my teeth weren't white enough, or I didn't get a job because of the color of my skin. And so, which is obviously a big rejection that says, why can't I play that role? If I'm articulate enough, if I'm smart enough, I can say the lines right. So yes, it's someone told me once in an acting class many years ago that acting was a way of healing your personality. And right, that's funny, right? But I feel like maybe it is, because I know for me, it's helped me to know myself on a deeper level. And it's helped me to realize that I'm not all of my characters. And it's helped me. No, not at all.
You're not Gus.
Look, I've given my children the Gus look, and they've broken down in tears, and I feel like a real shithead. Like, well, how could I look at you? I've had my daughters say, I've seen that look before, don't look at me that way. But the problem is they can see it in movies and TV. I can't really escape.
It's on celluloid forever. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Because this is SAG-AFTRA Foundation, we actually love hearing about all the rejection. If you want to talk about auditions in general, I think this is something that everybody can relate to. Do you have a worst audition horror story?
I have a few where, I can't remember my lines and I feel like I worked them really hard and I feel embarrassed and I have to start over. And so when you're in an audition, if you need to refer to the paper, it's really okay. It's not completely always expected that you should know it. My advice is that your perfection, you're already perfect. And so that's not going to take away from the ability to deliver the material if you have to take a peek at it. But I also feel like you got to take the best and leave the rest. And that's really, really important. I feel like we always want to walk in and be perfect, but what people are looking to see is if you have the complete feeling of the character, if you know who this person is, not so much that you remember exactly what they wrote. And also to walk in completely perfect sometimes tells a director that there's nothing that they can work with you. They want to be able to really collaborate and bring something out of you, which I think is also important to know. And rejection feels bad. It feels like I didn't get it, but it's not that you didn't get it. It's that this one wasn't for you, and the next one might be. I don't know. I used to really dislike auditioning until I realized something really valuable for me, and it was that stop going in trying to be perfect, but I realized it was my opportunity to work my craft on that day. It was that, and so I started to say, it just came out of my mouth one day, thank you for allowing me to do my work today. And it all of a sudden it flipped my whole idea of having to go in and read for people who seem like they don't even care. They're looking down at their shoes, and you're displaying emotion, tears in your eyes, ranting and raving, whatever the script calls for, and it seems like they're disinterested in it. And I realized that's the moment I realized I didn't need to please anyone else but myself, because inside you know if you're on or off, if you're in the zone or not. And then, you can ask to do it again. And so I started to be freer in auditioning. When I felt like a stumble there and I finished and there was silence, I say, can we just do it again? And then people would look at me like, yeah, sure. And then I would walk to a wall, stand there for a minute at least, take deep breaths, and come back, because it's your audition. It's your space and time. And you create the space with which to do your best work. So allow that to happen. Even if you have to call normally we walk in a room and reading with someone who can't read. It's like, have you experienced that? It's just like, wait a minute, and I just go, excuse me 1 second, can we just go and talk for a second and just read it to ourselves? Because the person who's reading with you isn't invested, isn't informed by any intention, isn't informed by the situation that's on the page. So you got to get with them, because that's your only choice to read with, and for a few minutes and get, I'm very tactile, I'm very audible. And so we want to hear each other's voices. We want to look in each other's eyes. And sometimes I tell the reader who I'm reading with, look at me. We're in this together. So some small tips that might help, but with complete grace. It's being able to take control of the moment that you have to show all of who you are for the folks who you would like to be working with.
And show all of who you are. I've never heard it put this way. This idea of be prepared. You're saying be as prepared as possible, but not perfect. And there is a distinction there, that by showing up entirely as you yourself, all of us are imperfect. And so if you're getting up there and being perfect, then the director's like, well, this is not real. This is not human enough.
I feel like we want to be able to see you, right? So yes, I do a lot of my work in a very method way, but still I want to find the best of me, because I believe that you still want to see a piece of me. And if you're completely, and yes, my best takes and the best work I do, I can't tell what I did. I feel like I'm not myself, which is great. But still, if you leave out the piece of you that's you're leaving out all of that beautiful energy and all of that wisdom that is your life. And I think that's important for us to see in a character that you might excel at. There has to be a connection. And if you don't have the connection, you create the connection. So like for Gustavo Fring, I created a whole backstory, which is still in my head for another show if they ever want to do it.
Oh, I bet it'll happen too.
And I've even mentioned it. I've talked to Peter Gould and to Vince. They're off in another world now, but there's a whole idea from where he came from. That's the kind of work that I think is necessary to create a complete character that you may never even really use, but it's in you. It's like in your DNA, and so we see it, and I think that's important at least it's important for my work, but I think it's important for all actors' work, because sometimes I think about things from Breaking Bad or even The Boys or other shows I've done, and I go, a line comes to me, and I go, oh, I didn't say that on the show. I wrote that in case I needed to say it. It was in my back pocket in case I needed to say it and use it because I related to that so much. So it's sort of like a spiritual journey when it comes down to it in the end, because I really feel like what I do in many ways, if I'm doing it the way I feel like I've been blessed to do it, it's a meditation. And so things come to me. So I sit reading the script, but I sit with a blank piece of paper in front of me, and all of a sudden I'm writing stuff that I might say, not to replace the writer's words, but to inform my backstory and who I am as a character.
Beautiful. We do have to wrap soon. It's so interesting to hear get these little snippets into your process. Is there like a piece of advice that you got early on, like from a mentor, or maybe something you read or consumed that has guided you, or that was a big turning point?
I think of George C. Scott. I worked with him as an extra on The Changeling. I was doing a show at the Uris Theater called Uncle Vanya. George C. Scott was one of my childhood idols and was a great, great actor. And when I was working at the Uris doing Seesaw, he was doing Vanya, and our day off we could see them, and their day off they could see us. And I was doing an interview with the cafe afterwards in the Uris Theater in New York, and this big, huge, heavy body came up from behind me and put his arm around my neck, and he was like, I saw you up there. I saw you up there. You were great. And you love it. And then he came around to the front and stared me in the eye, and he went, but don't do it.
What? Don't do it?
Don't do it. And my mouth drops open, unless you really have to. And I went, wow, dude. And it was George C. Scott. And I worked with him again on a film called Taps. And he came out and he had a 3-page monologue. And every time he had it down, perfect. Every time he did this speech on a certain word, he touched the brim of his hat. He touched the metal on his lapel. He took his hat off. It was time. He knew it. And then they would call cut, and he would disappear. So once I followed him, wonder where he was going in between takes. Took his hat off, walked in between the trucks. There was a table set up. A driver, one of the truck drivers was sitting there. They had a chess game going. And he sat down and continued to play chess. And he's playing chess, not looking at his lines, knew everything bulletproof. And later on, I said, so did you win? He said, yeah, I always win. And I said, do you have any advice for me? And part of our production, it was written by Darryl Planesian, the writer who wrote the book that Taps was based on. And he simply looked up at me and said, be true to yourself. And it sounds so simple, and we've heard it 1,000 times. But how often do we really step into and live our authentic truth? It's really, really important, because then it empowers you to really be in that space that is, don't have to be angry if people don't give you a shot. You don't have to be angry if the director doesn't take your note. You can be suggestive, and you could use a different, graceful and compassionate way to say, may I suggest that we try it this way? I was working with Baz Luhrmann on The Get Down, and I walked into a room with Jimmy Smits, all these stars. We were all in one scene in the kitchen. Okay, darling, you go here, you go there. I think you should start over there. And blah, 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 blah. And everyone just went like robots. And I stood there petrified, and I went, excuse me. Yes, dear. I said, could we just read the words? Just stand here and read the words. Oh, of course, darling. And we read the scene. Okay, now you go. I said, wait, Baz, I have one more request, please. Just indulge me. Would you mind if we read the words again, and if I just moved where I felt like I should move, where I felt compelled to go? Oh, of course. So we read the scene again, and I let my gut guide me, because I was the main character in the scene. And I finished doing that, but in the meantime, Jimmy Schmitz, all the other actors, their mouths are dropped open. This is Baz Luhrmann, man. And he said, wow, that's almost exactly where I wanted you to go. And so I tell that story only because it's important, not only in what we do as creators, is to follow our instinct. And I said, Baz, thank you, because once you allow me to go where I feel like I want to go, then you can move me around like a chess piece. But at least I've gotten that out of my system, and it may link up with what you wanted. In this case, it did. And he fell in love with me, and I fell in love with him, because I understood that sometimes we feel like we should just be sheep, right? And so empowering you to have your instinct and asking for what you want is just an opportunity to know that I feel like I'm supposed to be over here. And then to honor, oh, but wait a minute, I'm over here now. This doesn't feel right. So then let me just take it back a couple of lines, and then you take it back a couple of lines and go, oh, it was only here I need to be, right? So once you feel that instinct, then your performance is rooted and grounded, and it's strong and it's powerful, and it feels differently because you're in a different attitude within the room. And so it changes everything about how people react to you and you react to them. But for us to feel like we honor ourselves enough without feeling like I'm a spoiled diva, no one is, because I want to, as I said to Francis Ford Coppola on Megalopolis, Francis, as he's speaking to me over a bullhorn from 50 feet away, Giancarlo, 300 extras in the room, Giancarlo, I mean, if you could just say that line, by the time he finished his soliloquy, I was standing right next to him. And I went down on one knee. He said, oh, you're here. And I said, yeah. I said, Francis, it's just hard to take a note with 300 people in the room. And I said, Francis, just tell me what you want. Just tell me what you want. I want to do what you feel. I want to execute for you. I'm here for you. Tell me what you want. And that's ultimately what we want to do, but we don't want to disregard who we are, because we bring an essence of self and power and ideas to what we do. You won't always have the opportunity to be able to share those, but if you're able to voice asking for them, who knows, you might get them, as I did with Baz Luhrmann. So that's really, you're unique. Each one of us is unique in our own way, and we are able to be on a set and get a gig because of something that is intrinsically you, that's special and unique to you. And directors, writers, they want that. So when you're able to live in that truth and allow yourself space, time, honor your being to do your best work, people will see it. They'll have no choice. They see it. They're drawn to it. They love it. They want it. But it's really being in that truthful space and not doing it for any other reason than to render the material and what's in you truthful, organically honest, and real.
Beautiful. Wonderful. I feel like the best SAG-AFTRA conversations are when people get up and walk around and demonstrate that way. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for the life advice, acting advice, craft advice, career advice. You gave it all. So thanks so much, Giancarlo.
Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. Thank you.